A lonely black woman in a poor, isolated area found a scared little kid who had been on a refugee journey, hiding under an awning and holding a mysterious pendant on a chilly, wet afternoon. She kept him for 15 years, raising him with affection because she couldn't bear to let him go. Everything seemed to be falling into place until the day of a community recognition ceremony, where the boy was honored for his volunteer work and resilience. That's when a wealthy woman stepped out of a sleek black car, walked through the crowd, and declared the boy was her long-lost son, separated from her during their escape years ago. With his heart torn between two worlds, the boy was given a choice: a life of wealth and blood ties, or the quiet, struggling household of the woman who never stopped loving him. In the end, he chose a home where his soul felt safe, a life with both mothers, bound not just by history but by heart. His name was Malik. He was only 8 years old when his world was ripped apart by a sound no child should ever grow up remembering: the thunderous roar of bombs falling from the sky. In the span of seconds, he lost everything. His father gone, his mother buried beneath rubble, their home of memory scorched into ash. He ran because there was no other choice. Alone, barefoot, hungry, he ran with the desperation of a child who had no hand to hold, no voice calling his name. Malik was a war refugee, but to the world, he was just another number, another burden, another shadow slipping through the cracks. He crossed borders he didn't understand, walked roads that tore his feet raw, and clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, somewhere ahead, there would be safety. But safety never came. When he finally arrived in a new land, a western city, with bright lights and strange languages, he found himself invisible, a ghost wandering through a place that had no place for him. The city was cold, unforgiving. Every door he approached was slammed shut. Every face he looked into turned away. He slept near train stations, curled behind trash bins and under metal benches, his small body shaking from the cold, his coat too thin, his shoes long lost, his stomach empty more often than full. Some nights, the hunger was so sharp it felt like it was eating him from the inside out. He learned quickly which restaurants left scraps in their dumpsters, which corners offered brief warmth from passing trains, and which alleys to avoid once the sun disappeared. But even among the forgotten, Malik was still prey. Older street kids, hardened by survival, saw him as weak. He was beaten for food, kicked for speaking a different language, laughed at for clutching a small silver pendant, the only thing he had left of his mother, a tiny, battered charm in the shape of a bird. And yet, he never let go of it. Even when his body ached and his face bled and his heart cried out for someone, anyone, to see him, even then he held on to it. Because as long as he held that pendant, he still belonged to someone. He was still somebody's son. But after weeks of this life, something inside him began to break. He stopped crying, stopped begging, stopped hoping. Malik, the 8-year-old boy who once laughed at butterflies and raced the wind with his sister in her garden, began to disappear. In his place stood a thin, silent child with hollow eyes and a limp in his step, a boy learning how to disappear, because being invisible was safer than being seen. He was no longer looking for home. He was only looking for a way to survive the next day. Her name was Clara, a retired schoolteacher in her mid-60s. Clara had long since exchanged the sound of chalk on blackboards and children's laughter for the quiet hum of a kettle boiling in her tiny kitchen. She lived in a modest, red-brick row house tucked on the corner of a sleepy street, where the mail still came at the same time every morning, and the neighbors all nodded politely, but rarely stopped to talk. Clara's life was calm, predictable, and a little too quiet. Years ago, she had dreamed of a home filled with children, her own children, their drawings pinned to the fridge, their muddy shoes by the door. But life had other plans. A miscarriage, then another, a husband she adored taken too soon by illness. Now the house echoed with only her footsteps, and the ticking clock sometimes felt louder than it should. She filled her days with purpose, even if they were quiet ones. She volunteered at the local shelter twice a week, taught free reading lessons at the library, and always brought an extra sandwich just in case someone needed it more than she did. She didn't consider herself special. She just knew what loneliness looked like. And maybe that's why, on a bitter winter night, with the wind biting and snow beginning to gather on the pavement, Clara noticed something others had overlooked. She was walking home from the late shift at the shelter, bundled in her worn green coat, her scarf tucked up to her nose, when she saw a small figure crouched outside a bakery. The boy was sitting on a milk crate, arms wrapped around his knees, his head bowed low beneath a hood far too thin for the cold. There was something in the way he sat, too still for a child, too quiet for a place like that. That made Clara pause, her breath misting the air as she stepped closer. Then she saw his face. His skin was tight with cold, his lips chapped, his eyes sunken and cautious. In his hand, he clutched a small object, a pendant, shaped like a bird. He wasn't begging loudly like others might. He just sat there, silently enduring, as though he expected nothing. Clara reached into her bag and pulled out the sandwich she'd saved, roast beef on rye, still warm. She offered it gently. No words, just a gesture. He looked at her, wary, but hunger overcame pride. He took it. She didn't stay long that night. Just smiled, nodded, and walked on. But something about the boy stayed with her, a heaviness in her chest she hadn't felt in years. The next evening, she returned, this time with a thick wool blanket folded under her arm and a thermos of chicken soup. He was there again. Same crate, same silence. But his eyes lifted when he saw her, a flicker of recognition, even if he didn't speak. She sat near him, not too close. "I'm Clara," she said softly. "Just Clara." No questions, no pressure. The boy didn't reply, but he didn't run either. Day after day, she came back. Sometimes she brought food, sometimes books, sometimes just her presence. She told him stories about the children she once taught, about her husband who used to sing to the radio even though he was always off-key. She never pried into his past. She just shared hers. And little by little, Malik began to respond. Not in words, not yet, but in eyes that lingered a bit longer, hands that no longer trembled when she passed him something, shoulders that began to ease from their perpetual hunch. She noticed the bruises, old and new, the way he flinched when someone walked too close. This was a child who had been hurt, not once, but many times, and trust for him was not freely given. But Clara didn't give up. She had spent a lifetime teaching children that learning was a slow and beautiful process, and now she taught herself the same lesson when it came to love. Trust was built in quiet moments, in soft-spoken words, in warm meals and patience without strings. And slowly, painfully, Malik began to let her in. He began to eat beside her. He accepted her scarf when the wind howled. One night, after she handed him a small book filled with pictures of birds, he whispered his name, Malik, just one word. But for Clara, it was enough to light up the dark. She smiled, folded the blanket tighter around him, and whispered back, "That's a strong name, Malik, a name that means king." She didn't know then how deeply that name would matter, or how profoundly he would change her life in return. It happened on a night colder than most, the kind of night where the air feels sharp, where each gust of wind carries a whisper that winter is settling in for good. Malik was shivering under that same awning, his lips nearly blue, the blanket she'd given him days before soaked through with melting snow. Clara looked at him, really looked at him, and something inside her broke, not with pity, but with fierce maternal resolve. Without asking, without waiting for permission, she took his small, frozen hand into her own. "Come on, sweetheart," she said, voice steady. "We're going home." And for the first time since he fled the wreckage of his old life, Malik didn't resist. He followed her down the slushy sidewalk, past shuttered shops and flickering street lamps, all the way to her tiny second-floor apartment. The space was modest. A warm kitchen, a couch that had seen better days, a faded rug with sun-faded corners. But to Malik, it might as well have been a palace. She led him to the bathroom, ran the water warm, added lavender soap, not because she thought he'd care, but because it reminded her of gentler times. He sat in the tub like a statue at first, confused by comfort, but as the warmth wrapped around him, a sound escaped his throat, a sob, quiet, sharp, involuntary. She didn't comment. She just handed him a towel and waited nearby, her heart unraveling with every minute. That night, She gave him clothes that once belonged to her nephew, laid out a mattress on the floor beside her bedroom, and tucked him in gently. No questions, no pressure, just a whispered, "You're safe now, Malik. Sleep, darling. I'm right here." The next morning, she found him awake and sitting at the table, staring at the buttered toast she prepared like it was made of gold. He picked it up slowly, almost reverently, then looked at her and gave a tiny nod, a thank you without words. Days passed, then a week. Clara soon discovered he couldn't read or write, not a single word. It wasn't his fault. War had stolen more than his family. It had stolen his childhood. So she did what she knew best. She sat with him at the kitchen table, tracing letters on napkins, using spoons and fruit to teach math, pulling picture books from her old classroom storage boxes. At first, Malik was hesitant, ashamed, but Clara never judged. She celebrated every letter he wrote, every new word he stumbled through. "You're learning," she'd say, eyes twinkling. "That's what matters." In the evenings, she cooked meals just the way children liked, simple, warm, and familiar. Mashed potatoes with extra butter, chicken stew. Malik began to eat with both hands, sometimes forgetting to use a fork, like he was afraid the food might disappear if he didn't hurry. At night, Clara sat beside his mattress and read him stories from a tattered old storybook. He listened, wide-eyed, especially to the ones about lost children finding their way home. He never spoke much, but one night, when she finished reading about a little bear who finds a mother in the forest, he reached for her hand and held it. Clara wept silently that night, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that love had quietly returned to her life. But peace never lasts unchallenged. A knock came one morning, sharp, official. 2 child welfare officers, acting on an anonymous tip. They asked questions. Too many questions. Was she a licensed guardian? Did she have documentation? How long had this foreign child been in her care? Clara stood protectively in front of Malik, who hid behind the couch like a cornered animal. "I'm not his legal guardian," she admitted, "but I am his caregiver, his teacher, his home. And if you take him from me now, you'll be taking the only peace this boy has known in years." One officer softened. The other remained stern. Without proper paperwork, Malik was at risk of being placed into the system, the same system that often swallowed children like him whole. Clara didn't sleep that night. She sat at the table, pen in hand, drafting letters to lawyers, to advocacy groups, to anyone who would listen. And then she called a friend, a retired principal with a few legal connections. Clara had never asked for help in her life, but for Malik, she'd beg. "He's not just a boy," she told them all. "He's someone's son, and right now he's mine." And somehow, through paperwork, persistence, and fierce advocacy, Clara bought them time. Weeks turned into months. The authorities watched, but they did not intervene. In that small, imperfect apartment, love began to stitch Malik back together. He learned to tie his shoes. He practiced reading bedtime stories to her. He laughed for the first time in her kitchen, his voice high and bright, surprised by his own joy. And when he scraped his knee one day playing in the park, he didn't run or hide. He ran to her, arms wide, tears falling. "Mom!" he cried out for the first time. She froze, not out of confusion, but because it was the first time he'd ever called her anything. Then she knelt down, held him tight, and whispered through her tears, "Yes, baby, I'm right here." In that moment, the woman with a quiet life became something far louder. A mother, not by blood, but by choice. And Malik? He wasn't lost anymore. Peace has a way of slipping through your fingers just when you start to believe it might last. It had been nearly a year since Malik first entered Clara's world. A year filled with stories at bedtime, homemade pancakes on Sunday mornings, and gentle love that wrapped itself around both their wounds. But love, no matter how deep, is not always recognized by the system. And the system was watching. One gray morning, as rain pattered against the windows, the knock came again. Not a casual knock, not the polite tap of a neighbor. This was official, cold, loud, final. Clara opened the door to find 2 government workers and a man in uniform. Behind them, A black car idled with its engine running. Her heart sank. She knew. She knew before they even spoke. "Ma'am," one of them said, avoiding her eyes. "We have an order." The boy, Malik. "He's to be placed in a registered refugee center immediately. You're not a legal guardian, and we have no choice." "No," Clara whispered. "Please, don't do this. He's safe here. He's loved." "I'm sorry," they said. "Truly I am. But this isn't up to us anymore." Malik came into the room, rubbing his eyes. He was still wearing his pajamas, the soft ones Clara had sewn a patch onto just a week before. When he saw the strangers, saw the look in Clara's eyes, he understood. "No, no!" he cried out, running to her and grabbing her waist, burying his face in her side. "Please don't let them take me. Please." Clara held him like he was slipping through her arms. Her voice broke as she whispered, "They can't. They won't. I'll fix this, baby. I promise." But promises couldn't stop what came next. The officers pulled Malik gently but firmly away. He kicked, screamed, begged. His voice shattered the quiet peace of the apartment. "I'll be good. I'll go to school. I'll do anything. Please, Mom, don't let them take me." And just like that, he was gone. The car pulled away from the curb, taillights glowing red against the wet street. Clara stood barefoot at the door, her arms still outstretched, her soul hollow. She didn't eat that night. She didn't sleep. Her home, once filled with warmth and light, felt like a tomb. But she wasn't finished. The next morning, she was on the phone. Then the next, and the next. She called the Child Welfare Office. She wrote petitions. She visited advocacy groups. She pulled favors from every friend she'd ever had in the school system. She wrote letters to lawyers, to newspapers, to anyone who might care. Some responded with polite sympathy, others with cold indifference. One letter came back unopened. Still, she kept fighting. And slowly, a small mercy was granted, supervised visits. 1 hour once a month, in a sterile white room with plastic chairs and no privacy. The first time she walked in, Malik ran to her with a sob, his arms shaking as they wrapped around her neck. But he was thinner now, his eyes duller. The spark she had seen every morning at the breakfast table was flickering. He didn't laugh anymore. He told her the food at the center was cold, that the beds were hard, that the other boys didn't talk much. No bedtime stories. No music. No, "I'm proud of you," when he showed someone a drawing. Just waiting. Endless waiting. Each visit ended the same way. A timer buzzed. A worker stood up. Malik clung to Clara until the very last second, like a child trying to hold on to sunlight. Afterward, Clara would sit in her car and cry, her hands gripping the steering wheel, her knuckles white. She started bringing books to each visit, the same ones they used to read. She started slipping small drawings under the table. A cartoon of the two of them holding hands, standing in front of their tiny apartment. She never said goodbye. Only, "See you soon, my heart." But the months wore Malik down. He stopped smiling in photos. He stopped asking to go home. His voice grew quieter with each visit, his sentences shorter. Clara could see it. He was fading. Not just emotionally, but spiritually. He wasn't being abused. He wasn't being mistreated. He was simply forgotten. One more name on a clipboard. And Clara? She refused to forget. Refused to let go. Refused to believe that the story of a child who had already lost so much would end like this. So she began writing again. Not to lawyers this time, but to Malik. Every day. Letters she knew he might not even receive. "I'm still here. I'm fighting. You are still my son, no matter what." And every letter ended the same way. "Love, Mom." Hope often arrives quietly, not with fireworks or grand parades, but with a simple envelope slid under a door or a phone call that starts with, "We have news." Clara had spent over a year fighting tooth and nail for Malik. Endless forms, countless hearings, nights where she fell asleep with legal books open in her lap and tear stains on the pages. She had aged. She knew it. Her joints ached more. Her eyes saw less clearly. But none of that mattered, because on a rainy spring afternoon, the kind where the world feels like it's holding its breath, The phone rang. The voice on the other end was formal. "Miss Clara Thompson? This is Child and Family Services. We're calling to inform you the court has ruled in your favor. You've been granted legal foster rights to Malik, effective immediately." For a moment, she couldn't speak. Her heart pounded in her ears. She gripped the table to steady herself. Then the tears came, loud, sobbing tears. The kind that come when a storm has passed after wrecking everything in its path. But the sun still rises. The day Malik returned, he didn't run into her arms. He stood at the doorstep like a boy carrying too many ghosts. He was taller. His eyes seemed older than they should have been. She smiled gently. "Welcome home, Malik." He nodded but didn't speak, just stepped in slowly, as though unsure whether the walls would hold. That night, she made his favorite, roasted chicken with rosemary potatoes. He barely touched it. His silence said more than words ever could. Trauma leaves its fingerprint. Even love can't erase it overnight. But Clara didn't try to erase. She simply showed up day after day. She sat with him when he didn't want to talk. She let him cry in the middle of the night and never asked why. She took him to therapy week after week and waited in the car no matter how long it took. And slowly, he began to thaw. One morning, she found him sketching something on the back of a cereal box. It was a house, tall windows, arched doorways, open space. "You drew this?" she asked. He shrugged. "Just a dream." It wasn't just a dream. It was a talent. At school, his teachers noticed. He could look at a building once and replicate it from memory. He understood structure, form, light, things most kids his age never thought about. Architecture, that's what they called it. Clara beamed with pride, but a quiet worry gnawed at her. Architecture school wasn't cheap. She had lived modestly her whole life, never needed much. But now, Malik needed something she couldn't give easily. So she did what only a mother would do. She emptied out her retirement savings, bit by bit. The trip she once dreamed of taking to Italy? Gone. The kitchen she planned to remodel? Forgotten. Every dollar went toward Malik's future. Books, application fees, software, tutors. She never told him the full extent of what she gave up. She only told him this: "I didn't bring you into this world, Malik, but I'd give my whole world to see you shine." He worked. Oh, how he worked. Nights with barely any sleep. Weekends filled with drafting and deadlines. And then the letter came. One of the top universities. Full scholarship. Architecture program. He had done it. The night he opened that envelope, he just stared at it for a long time. Then he turned to Clara, eyes wide and wet. "I wouldn't have made it without you," he whispered. She touched his face and smiled softly. "No matter where you go," she said, "you will always be my boy." In that moment, he broke. The years of pain, loss, uncertainty, they spilled out of him like floodwaters, and she caught every tear. Because love doesn't always begin in a hospital room. Sometimes it begins on a cold sidewalk outside a bakery. Sometimes it grows through letters, courtrooms, and silent dinners. And sometimes it's a steady flame that guides a broken soul home. This was their turning point, not just from separation to reunion, but from survival to legacy. Time moved like the tide, slow and certain, never stopping for anyone. After the scholarship, Malik left with a heart full of dreams and a suitcase half full of clothes. The day he boarded the plane, Clara stood at the airport waving until he was gone from sight. She didn't cry then. She had promised herself she wouldn't. He needed strength, not sorrow. He turned back once at the terminal gate and gave her a smile, his brave smile. "I'll call every week," he said. And he did, for a while. At first, the calls were frequent. Excited voices crackled through long-distance lines. Stories about professors, strange new foods, city lights that never dimmed. He sent postcards, too. Little snapshots of another world. "Thinking of you," he'd write. "Wish you could see this place." But then, the calls began to thin. One a week became one a month. Then just texts. Then silence. At first, Clara made excuses for him. "He's busy," she'd tell her neighbor, brushing the dust off the phone receiver. College is demanding, she'd say, opening an empty mailbox with hope she pretended not to have. But years passed. The paint peeled from her porch. The roof leaked again that winter. The heater wheezed like an old man. And still, nothing. Her legs didn't work the way they used to. The doctor called it normal aging. But what was normal about watching the only child you've ever loved vanish into silence? Some days, she'd sit in the living room with the lamp turned off and replay old voicemails. "Hey, Clara, it's me. Just passed my midterms. I knew you'd want to know." Click. "Clara, I had to design a model for my first studio class. It's not great, but you'd love it." Click. "Love you, Clara. Always." Click. Eventually, there were no more to replay. The neighbors whispered. People always do. They saw her worn-out shoes, her untrimmed hedges, her mailbox that leaned just a little to the left. "He just left her," they muttered. She gave up everything for him. Typical. She never defended him. Not because she agreed, but because she couldn't bear to say the words. Maybe they're right. Evenings felt longer now. The sun took its time saying goodbye. Clara kept herself going with routine. Tea at 6. A short walk if her knees allowed it. A radio talk show in the afternoons. And once a month, she'd sit at the small wooden table and write him a letter she never sent. She always began the same way. "Dear Malik, I hope you're safe. I hope you're warm. I hope you still remember the stories I used to tell you." She had aged visibly so. The fire in her hair had gone white. Her voice was softer now, like the whisper wind through autumn leaves. Some days she misplaced words. Other days she misplaced time. And then her 85th birthday arrived. No cards. No flowers. The only celebration was a slice of chocolate cake she bought for herself from the corner bakery. She sat at the table with the lights dimmed, a single candle flickering above the frosting. "Make a wish," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. She closed her eyes and said nothing aloud. But inside, she wished for something she hadn't dared say in years. "Please, let me know he's okay." Just once more. She opened her eyes, leaned forward, and blew out the candle. The room returned to darkness. And then, knock, knock. At first, she thought it was the wind. Then it came again. Knock, knock. Her heart, slow for so long, stuttered. She rose, slowly, carefully, and shuffled toward the door. The knob felt cold beneath her hand. She opened it, and there he stood, Malik, no longer a boy, a man, taller, broader, eyes older, but unmistakably his. He carried nothing but a small suitcase and something wrapped in brown paper. For a moment, they said nothing. Her lip quivered. His eyes shimmered. Then, finally, Clara's voice broke the silence. "Malik?" He nodded, voice thick with emotion. "I'm home." The wind outside whispered through the trees. Inside, something eternal shifted. Not just a return, a resurrection. There he stood, no longer the skinny, frightened boy she had once found trembling in the cold. Malik was now a man, a strong, composed figure in a sharp, tailored suit, standing in the doorway like a son who had finally found his way back to where his heart belonged. Clara's frail frame quivered as her old eyes searched his face, barely believing what stood before her. Her hand reached out, shaking, and he took it with both of his. He didn't say anything at first, his throat too full, his heart too loud. And then he dropped to his knees before her, burying his face in her lap, just as he did when he was a child. Tears streamed down his cheeks. "I'm so sorry I was gone for so long," he choked out. "But I was building something for you." Clara touched his face, brushing tears from the cheek of the man who had once fallen asleep in her arms during thunderstorms. She wanted to ask questions, so many, but in that moment none of them mattered. He was here. The next day, he asked her to take a drive. He insisted on pushing her wheelchair himself. Every crack in the sidewalk, every bump in the road, he noticed. He always had, even as a child. They drove through the town she'd known for decades, past streets that held old memories, until they reached a quiet hillside just beyond the city. There, nestled under the gentle sweep of trees and sunlight, stood a home unlike any Clara had ever seen. Warm wooden tones, wide ramps, windows tall and generous with light, a garden along the edge with her favorite marigolds, already blooming. Malik led her to the front, then crouched beside her. "I designed it for you," he said quietly. "Every detail, every inch." He pushed open the door, and Clara's breath caught in her throat. Inside, everything spoke of love. Wide hallways for her chair, lowered shelves, a fireplace like the one she'd once said she'd always dreamed of. Beside it, a bookshelf filled with the same stories she had once read to him when he couldn't sleep. And then she saw it. On the entry wall, a polished brass plaque. It read, "To Clara, who gave me my first home." Clara pressed her hand to her heart, speechless. Her eyes brimmed over. Malik took her hand and kissed her knuckles gently, just like he had when he was small and trying to say thank you without words. "I thought you forgot me," she whispered. He knelt beside her, voice shaking. "You were never out of my heart, not for a single day. I had to disappear to build the life you always told me I could have, but I never stopped carrying you with me." She looked around again, at the space, the care, the memories woven into the walls, and then at him. And in that moment, she didn't see the architect. She didn't see the suit. She saw her boy. That evening, as the sun began to set over the hills, Malik wheeled Clara out onto the porch. The horizon blushed with golden light, soft and tender like a lullaby. They sat together in silence, no words needed, just the sound of birds returning to trees and a wind that no longer carried sorrow. Malik looked at her, his voice full and steady. "Now it's your turn to rest." Clara smiled, a real peaceful smile, one that said everything. She reached out, and he took her hand, and together they sat, an old woman and her boy, no longer lost, in a home built not just with bricks or blueprints, but with 20 years of love. Sometimes love doesn't return in the way we expect. Sometimes it disappears into silence, into years, into the unknown. But sometimes, just sometimes, love returns, with arms full of memory, with a key in its hand, and gives us a home filled with love. We see the story not just of two lives intertwined, but of how love, true sacrificial love, can reach across borders, across silence, across time. Clara and Malik's journey was never perfect. It was carved in hardship, etched in sacrifice, but it was also painted with hope, with warmth, with fierce, unwavering care. As the years passed, their bond only deepened. A mother not by blood, but by heart. A son not by birth, but by choice. We see Malik placing a hand gently on Clara's shoulder as they look through old photo albums. We see her laughing, wrinkles folding with joy, as he bakes her favorite cookies, burned just slightly, the way she used to make them. We see birthdays, quiet porch evenings, letters she kept from him, folded and reread 100 times. And we see something rare, love that never demanded to be repaid, yet was repaid in the most beautiful way. Clara didn't rescue a boy. She planted a legacy. And Malik didn't just return. He returned with roots, with honor, with a home built from her kindness. Somewhere out there tonight, another child is cold, hungry, alone, holding on to something small and silent, like a pendant or a memory, or just the dream of being seen. And somewhere, someone has the power to reach out. Maybe that someone is you, because sometimes one act of kindness can become a lifetime of love. One open door can rewrite the story. One hand extended can build a future. If this story moved you, let your voice echo it. Like, comment, share. Let's remind the world. Every child deserves a home. Every heart deserves to be remembered. And love, real love, always finds its way back.